Did he really do this? I suffered from a false accusation and was unfairly convicted. But years later I had my glorious revenge. My name is Michael, and for many years, my life was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. It all began on a crisp autumn morning, when my world was shattered by a lie so devastating that it turned my entire existence upside down. I had always been a devoted family man, with a wife, 2 children, and a modest home in the suburbs. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy. Or at least we were until that fateful day. The accusation came out of nowhere, like a bolt of lightning on a clear day. One moment I was living an ordinary life, and the next I was being accused of a crime I didn't commit. The shock was overwhelming. How could anyone believe such a heinous lie? But as I stood in my living room, surrounded by police officers and with my family's stunned faces looking at me, I realized that my life as I knew it was over. Our family had always been close-knit. We shared Sunday dinners, celebrated birthdays with enthusiasm, and supported each other through life's ups and downs. My wife, Laura, was my rock, and our 2 children, Emily and Jack, were the center of our world. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and gossip spread like wildfire. It was in this tight-knit community that the seeds of my downfall were sown. The weeks leading up to the accusation had been uneventful. I had been busy with work at the local hardware store, where I had been employed for over a decade. Laura was a teacher at the elementary school, and she often brought home stories of her students' triumphs and struggles. Our lives were ordinary but fulfilling, marked by routines and rituals that brought us comfort and joy. Little did we know, a storm was brewing just beneath the surface, one that would tear our family apart and leave us grappling with betrayal and heartache. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when the incident that sparked the false accusation occurred. I had just returned home from work, tired but content. As I walked through the door, I noticed an unusual tension in the air. Laura was standing in the kitchen, her face pale and her eyes wide with distress. Before I could ask what was wrong, she handed me a letter, a formal, typed document that made my heart sink. The letter was from the police, stating that I was under investigation for embezzlement from the hardware store where I worked. I couldn't believe my eyes. Embezzlement? Me? I had always been honest and hardworking, dedicated to providing for my family. The accusations were baseless, yet the details were shockingly precise, making it clear that someone had gone to great lengths to frame me. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, I realized that this was only the beginning of a nightmare that would consume my life. The next morning, I found myself sitting in a sterile interrogation room at the police station. The officer across from me, Detective Harris, was a stern man with a no-nonsense demeanor. He laid out the accusations in detail, his eyes never leaving mine. According to the evidence, I had siphoned off thousands of dollars over the past year, covering my tracks with meticulous false entries in the store's financial records. My mind was racing, trying to grasp how anyone could believe I was capable of such deceit. As the interrogation progressed, I repeatedly proclaimed my innocence, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The betrayal felt suffocating, especially when I thought about my boss, Mr. Thompson, who had treated me like a son. How could he, of all people, believe these lies? My thoughts kept returning to my family, imagining their confusion and pain. By the end of the interrogation, I was formally charged with embezzlement, and the weight of the false accusation settled heavily on my shoulders. The disbelief in my friends' and neighbors' eyes as I was led away in handcuffs was a sight I would never forget. Returning home on bail, I found our once warm and welcoming house cloaked in a shadow of suspicion and fear. Laura's initial shock had given way to silent tears and a palpable distance between us. Emily and Jack, too young to fully grasp the situation, sensed the tension and kept to their rooms, their laughter replaced by whispers and worried glances. The trust and harmony that had been the foundation of our family life were now shattered, replaced by an invisible wall of doubt. In the following days, the community's reaction was swift and merciless. Friends I had known for years avoided me, and I could feel the weight of their judgment in every glance and whispered conversation. The hardest blow came from my boss, Mr. Thompson, who publicly condemned me without hesitation, ensuring that everyone knew he believed in my guilt. The hardware store, once a place of camaraderie and pride, was now off limits, as I was suspended pending the outcome of the trial. The isolation was suffocating, and the relentless pressure from every direction made it difficult to see a way out of the darkness that had engulfed my life. The day of the trial arrived with an overwhelming sense of dread. I sat at the defendant's table, my lawyer beside me, feeling the weight of the room's judgmental stares. The prosecutor laid out the case with a cold efficiency, presenting the fabricated evidence as if it were undeniable truth. Bank statements, altered documents, and witness testimonies from colleagues all pointed to my supposed guilt. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin, and I could see the doubt even in Laura's eyes as she sat in the audience, clutching Emily and Jack. My lawyer did his best to counter the accusations, questioning the authenticity of the documents and the credibility of the witnesses. But the deck was stacked against us. The prosecutor's case was airtight, meticulously crafted to paint me as a calculating thief. As the trial dragged on, it became clear that the jury was swayed by the seemingly irrefutable evidence. When the time came for the verdict, I felt a numb resignation. The words "guilty on all counts" echoed through the courtroom, and my heart sank as I was led away in handcuffs. My family's tear-streaked faces the last thing I saw before the doors closed behind me. As the cell door clanged shut behind me, the reality of my situation hit me like a freight train. Convicted of a crime I didn't commit, I was now just another inmate in a prison system that didn't care about innocence or guilt. The first night was the hardest. The cold, hard bunk felt like an iron shackle, and the sounds of other prisoners only heightened my sense of isolation. The bitterness of injustice gnawed at me, and I couldn't help but replay the trial in my mind, searching for some missed detail that could have saved me. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. In prison, I learned to navigate the unspoken rules of survival. I kept my head down, avoided trouble, and clung to the hope that one day, the truth would come out. Letters from Laura were a lifeline, but they were infrequent and often tinged with despair. Emily and Jack's innocent questions about when I'd come home broke my heart. The hardest part was knowing that my family was suffering just as much as I was. The stigma of my conviction followed them everywhere, turning our once supportive community into a source of constant judgment and scorn. Prison life was a relentless grind, each day blending into the next in a monotonous blur. The routine was harsh, but I found ways to cope. I spent hours in the prison library, losing myself in books to escape my grim reality. Through reading, I discovered a resilience I didn't know I had. I also began keeping a journal, documenting my thoughts and the details of my case. It became a lifeline, a place where I could process my anger and frustration. Despite the isolation, I managed to find some semblance of camaraderie with a few fellow inmates. We shared our stories and supported each other in small but meaningful ways. One of them, an older man named Joe, became a close friend and mentor. He encouraged me to keep fighting for my innocence, reminding me that even in the darkest places, hope could still exist. His words were a beacon of light in the otherwise bleak environment. As the years passed, I clung to the hope that someday, the truth would come to light. I missed my family terribly and longed for the day I could hold them again without the shadow of a prison wall between us. In my darkest moments, it was the thought of my children, Emily and Jack, that kept me going. I vowed to clear my name not just for myself, but for them. They deserved to know the truth about their father. After 5 long years, I was released on parole. The world outside felt both familiar and foreign, as if time had moved on without me. The relief of being out of prison was tempered by the reality of my tarnished reputation. The stigma of my conviction followed me like a shadow, making it nearly impossible to find work or rebuild my life. Returning home was bittersweet. Laura had stood by me, but our relationship was strained. The years apart had created a chasm between us, filled with unspoken pain and unresolved anger. Emily and Jack, now teenagers, were distant, their childhoods marked by my absence and the whispers of the community. I struggled to reconnect with them, to bridge the gap that the false accusation had created. Determined to clear my name, I threw myself into investigating my case. I spent countless hours poring over legal documents and searching for new evidence. It was during one of these late-night sessions that I stumbled upon a crucial detail that had been overlooked during the trial. A discrepancy in the financial records that suggested tampering. This discovery reignited my hope and set me on a path to uncover the truth and restore my family's honor. Armed with the newfound discrepancy in the financial records, I sought the help of a dedicated lawyer who believed in my innocence. Together, we launched an exhaustive investigation. We interviewed witnesses, re-examined old evidence, and dug deep into the paper trail left behind. Each piece of information we uncovered painted a clearer picture of the deception that had ensnared me. Months passed as we meticulously built our case. The more we dug, the more confident we became that the embezzlement accusations were not only false but deliberately fabricated to frame me. The evidence pointed towards a disgruntled former employee who had access to the financial records and harbored resentment towards me. We uncovered emails and testimonies that corroborated our suspicions, painting a compelling narrative of manipulation and betrayal. As the weight of evidence grew, so did my determination to clear my name once and for all. I knew that this discovery was not just about exoneration. It was about justice for my family, who had suffered alongside me throughout this ordeal. With each passing day, the truth seemed closer within reach, and I held on to the hope that soon, I would finally be able to reclaim my life and restore my family's faith in me. The day of the hearing arrived, filled with a mix of nervous anticipation and cautious optimism. I sat in the courtroom, surrounded by my lawyer and supportive friends who had stood by me through it all. The atmosphere crackled with tension as the judge reviewed the new evidence presented. The prosecution attempted to undermine our findings, but each attempt fell short against the weight of truth and facts we had meticulously gathered. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge delivered the verdict. Based on the newly discovered evidence and the lack of credible testimony against the defendant, this court finds Michael not guilty of all charges. The words hung in the air, sinking in slowly as the weight of the false conviction lifted off my shoulders. Tears streamed down Laura's face as she embraced me, and Emily and Jack rushed forward, their expressions a mix of joy and relief. Leaving the courtroom that day, I felt a sense of vindication that words could not fully capture. The years of hardship and despair had culminated in this moment of truth and justice. The community that had once shunned me now rallied around us, offering apologies and support. Mr. Thompson, my former boss, publicly acknowledged his error in judgment and offered a heartfelt apology. It was a moment of closure, a chance to finally put the past behind us and look towards rebuilding our lives. With my name cleared and my family's faith restored, I faced a choice: to let go of the bitterness or to seek revenge on those who had wronged me. Ultimately, I chose forgiveness over vengeance. I focused on rebuilding my relationships and reclaiming my place in the community. The experience had taught me resilience, compassion, and the importance of standing up for justice. As for the person who had framed me, they were eventually caught in their own web of deceit. Karma, it seemed, had a way of balancing the scales. I found solace in knowing that my focus was now on the future, on cherishing every moment with Laura, Emily, and Jack, and on making a positive impact in the lives of others. The scars of the false accusation would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. In the end, my story is not just one of suffering and redemption, but of hope and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It is a testament to the power of truth and perseverance in the face of adversity, and a reminder that justice, though delayed, can ultimately prevail.